Well, shalom, and thanks so much for joining us for this special hybrid podcast slash webcast brought to you by Jewish Voice Ministries International. I'm your co-host, Ezra Benjamin, Vice President of Global Ministry Affairs here at Jewish Voice.
And I'm Carly Berna, Vice President of Marketing and Communications.
And Carly and I are teaming up together to bring you a really important and timely update. You know, everybody in the world is talking about coronavirus, COVID-19, what that has to do for them and their own situation. But we want to extend beyond the borders of our countries of residence and citizenship today to bring you an important update that you may not be hearing almost anything about. And it's how coronavirus is affecting life and ministry opportunities in the nation of Israel. We know you stand with Israel. We know you pray for Israel, and we want to give you some important updates directly from Israelis and those doing ministry there, so you know how to stand with Israel and to pray and to get involved. Now more than ever, Israel needs your prayers, needs your help, needs your support. And we want to provide you with some real practical information to enable you to do that, and also to be up to date on things you're not hearing on the news. 3 interviews today that are coming in just a moment. First of all, Tamar, our program manager here at Jewish Voice for our work in Israel. Tamar interfaces with over 60 ministries that Jewish Voice Ministries supports in Israel, and she's going to join us from our Phoenix headquarters here and tell us what the situation is on the ground in Israel, big picture. Stuart and Chantel Winograd lead a ministry called Reach Initiative, and they have been in Israel for a period of time. They just came back to the States, but they're going to update us on a highly vulnerable but very important to the heart of God segment of the Israeli community, the Holocaust survivors living in Israel. And then finally, Yoel Shoshani, who's an entrepreneur and a ministry leader living outside Jerusalem in the land, native-born Israeli, is going to tell us what the situation is for him, for his family, and for ministries and ministry leaders as they prepare for Passover in the middle of a national lockdown. So stay tuned.
Thanks, Tamar, for joining us. You've been the Israel Program Manager at Jewish Voice for 3 years or so. I think you lived in Tel Aviv and have a good pulse on Israel and the ministry world there. Can you tell us about what the specific regulations are going on in Israel and how strictly they're being enforced right now?
So the regulations with COVID-19 started mid-March and have become stricter and stricter. I'm just going to bring up this website that shows you exactly what's allowed and what's not allowed going around. So let's say for a brit, which is a ceremony for a child, that's allowed to go, but only until 10 people. And funerals only until 20 people. And they all have to be in open spaces with 6 feet in between. You can go to get medical attention. You can go to get groceries. You can walk around your house only 110 yards. So it's like very close to your house. You can't meet with anybody. Yeah. And last night, Bibi even made it more restrict. And now you can meet only 2 people that are not from the same immediate family. So beyond 2 people, it's just not allowed, and they are giving out fines. So yeah, you're actually really locked in home, except for those specific cases.
Wow.
So that's to say, I mean, how are people self-regulating in the sense that do they have to carry a tape measure and measure 100 meters? And what happens if you see somebody turn a street corner? Do the police just stop them? How much of a police state is it in Israel right now with all these regulations, or is it sort of self-enforced?
No, Bibi said to the police to enforce everybody to keep the rules, and they have apps on your phone specifically for this. Like you put in your address and it shows you exactly the meter, like 100 meters, which is 110 yards around your address and until where you can walk. And even walk your dog, you have to stay in those boundaries. Yeah.
Wow, it's pretty strict.
Wow. So has this kind of lockdown ever happened in Israeli history that you're aware of?
No, not as I'm aware of, and it hasn't happened like in Israel. I checked it. Not this kind of lockdown ever. Not even when we had like war with Saddam Hussein in the 90s. I remember we had like these gas masks, but we're not in lockdown. We're just and that's just like for a few days. Here's a few weeks, and we're talking about months almost.
Right. What you
do. And not only to feel isolated and lonely, but they're fearful. You
Mhm.
know, it's a really scary time for people like them.
They're the
And
most
so,
vulnerable, right? 80s,
yeah.
90s, many of them have health issues.
But you know what we've noticed though with many of them, they are survivors. They're
Uh-huh.
people, you know, they have hope and they're fighters and they're survivors. And so I pray that you know God would meet them all, that they would
Yeah,
be protected, and that they will fight through this, and they'll be survivors of this too. And we'll
sure.
meet again, you know,
Yeah,
when we can get to Israel and give them hugs and you know be able to love on them again.
Yeah,
right.
Carly, I can't say that we're completely alleviating their feelings of isolation and loneliness, but we're trying to do our part to
Mhm.
do
Yeah.
everything we can to relieve those feelings of isolation and loneliness through
Mhm.
the phone calls and the Passover gifts that we're going to deliver and the help that we're providing.
Right.
Mhm.
So good.
Great.
You know, many of our listeners may be saying, I certainly can't go to Israel. I can't really go anywhere now, but I can't go over to Israel and I can't help. But how can I pray? What's the biggest prayer need for yourselves and others ministering in Israel to these Holocaust survivors in this season with coronavirus?
You know, Ezra, I think it's the same prayer that I've been praying for you and all of my friends. You know, we've been
Mhm.
friends a long time,
Sure.
and Jonathan and me and Chantal have been friends for almost 30 years and
Mhm.
partnered together. We're grateful for Jewish Voice and the partnership that we have in many areas of ministry.
Mhm.
So this is the prayer I've been praying really for everyone, and I think this
Mhm.
is a prayer that your listeners can pray for the Holocaust survivors and
Mhm.
for all of our team serving.
Yeah.
Um, and it's this. It comes from 3rd John, the third letter of John, verse
Mhm.
2. It says, "Loved ones, I pray that all will go well with you and that you will be in health, just
Mhm.
as your soul is going well." And
Yeah.
so I would encourage people to make that simple prayer for the survivors. It covers a lot of ground and you can
Mhm.
build off that. Yeah.
So, as you mentioned at the beginning, you know, you're not in Israel right now. When do you think you'll go back, and what do you think you'll find when you do go back?
Well, we had planned to go back on June 7th,
Mm.
but, who knows? This whole novel, brand new virus. I mean, I have a son in law who's a doctor, and he's treating coronavirus patients in the
Wow.
hospital. Yeah, and so he tells me that, there's so little we know about it. We're just learning about it, and it's hard to say. I mean, we hope that it's going to peak out in Israel and the
Mhm.
United States and other places in the next 2 weeks and start to die down, and we're going to get better treatments and so on. But, it's all, in the Lord's hands. And one thing I also want to say, when we
Mhm.
say it's in the Lord's hands, this didn't surprise the Lord. He told us
Sure.
that these kind of things would come on the earth: famines, wars, earthquakes, epidemics, like we're experiencing. And so this is not surprising him. And I'm so grateful that we can trust in him, that he never leaves us or forsakes us, and that we can boldly say that he
Mhm.
is our helper in time of need. And so
Amen.
we're trusting him to guide our steps. We're trusting him to bless all of you folks and all of your listeners, to bless our Holocaust survivor friends, and many of them are like family to us, and to
Sure.
bless our teams around the world. We're just we're going with it step by step.
Sure. Sure. Awesome. Well, thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for being a partner of this program and this ministry. Rabbi Stewart and Chantel, have a great Passover. Stay healthy, stay safe. Can't wait to hear more from you in a few months.
Always great to
Okay.
be with you. Hag
Thank you.
Pesach Sameach.
You
Happy
too.
Passover. Many blessings to you all.
Amen. You too. Thank you.
Shalom.
Well, our final guest for this episode is Yoel Shoshani, an entrepreneur involved in business development in many arenas in Israel. and we're speaking with him directly from Israel tonight. Yoel, welcome. This is your, fourth week locked in your house in Israel as restrictions continue?
Yeah, restrictions continue. First of all, this is great to be here. We are entering the fourth week, and
Okay.
this is a very interesting time.
Hmm. Indeed. So how long do you see this lasting? Has Prime Minister Netanyahu said anything about how long you should expect this to go before things normalize?
Well, there's a lot of stuff going on. So there's not this total lockdown, shutdown. You can't drive or anything. There's many things that you're allowed to do, like go grocery shopping. You can actually go to any job you can go to. There's only restrictions on which businesses can be open. For example, shops can't have people entering them, so they have to serve people in the parking lot. Restaurants can only serve food and takeaway. So there's different restrictions, but we're not in full shutdown. I guess
Okay.
one of the hardest things is that there isn't a clear definition of what's going on. In other
Hmm.
words, people are saying, well, can we work? Can we not work? Can we do this? Can we not do this? And it's not
Hmm.
clear. Regarding your
Okay.
question about time, what we're seeing is that everyone's trying to fight this curve, right? We're trying
Hmm.
to make sure we don't get into these huge multiples of people getting infected with the coronavirus. And the way that they're doing that is they're restricting movement, and now they're talking about starting. I guess the balance is always between the economics and the health. Because if you shut everything down, you're going to have 100% victory in health, or very
Uh-huh.
high, but the economical implications will be huge. So what they're talking about now is that we're right before Passover. On Wednesday night, we'll be celebrating the Passover Seder,
Right.
and then we'll be finishing with that mid-April,
Hmm.
uh, around, I think it's about the 16th or 17th of April, and they're talking about
Sure.
starting to bring businesses back then,
Okay.
and then assessing a couple weeks later what they're going to be doing with schools,
Right.
specifically for young kids.
Okay. Have schools officially been closed until August or until the fall, or that's not yet official?
Well, they're actually they closed them indefinitely, but they're not making any clear claims.
Yeah.
We have three little girls, and they've been home with us since the 15th of March.
Right.
Uh, and that's a very exciting time, I guess, for everyone. Very exciting time to
Sure.
have kids at home.
Hmm.
Big benefit for those who are used to homeschooling. We're not, so those who homeschool must be having an easier time than some
Right.
of the people that need to adjust.
I'm
Mhm.
sure. Sure.
Do you feel like people are still staying connected, or do they feel isolated because they're stuck in their homes?
It's isolated. I think that it's hard. People are desperate for relationship. We're allowed to leave our house up to 100 meters just for a walk, which is about 100 yards, right?
Right.
And we went out of the house today and we saw neighbors, and their first thing that they were saying as they were pulling into their parking was humans, humans. And I think people are missing human interaction. What
Sure.
I would say is that even though people are missing human interaction, those who have families, we may be throwing jokes around, the kids at home, all this kind of stuff, and it's tough. But those that
Uh-huh.
don't have kids at home are having a really hard time. Those single people are having a really hard time, and the grandparents that are used to seeing the grandchildren. Israel's
Hmm.
a very close, warm society. We see
Yeah.
everyone, we
Right.
hug, we touch,
Right.
and when you have grandparents stuck at home, they're
Yeah.
also in the danger age group and the
Sure.
at-risk age group. That's really hard for them. The grandparents are really having a hard time not being able to just talk to the kids.
Hmm.
And also the technological gap, the older you get, is also greater. So you may
Yeah.
not hear properly and you don't know how to fix it, or you may not see properly on your phone trying to WhatsApp or Zoom with the kids or grandchildren. It's tough.
Hmm.
Sure.
You
Sure.
mentioned that, Passover's coming up in a couple of days. How do you think people will celebrate that differently? Since, like you said, many people, grandparents, single people will be alone.
Well, they're making very clear restrictions right now, and they're saying that they're going to be using mild force to enforce them, because we're seeing different sects of society that are not respecting the rules like they should.
Hmm.
The Passover schedule is a big one. This is sort of the top of the family time together.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
to tell a family they can't be together in Passover, I mean, that's a really tough one. Even the
Mm.
Bible says to us, it says we should teach this to our children and them to their children, and it's a
Right.
real commandment. And tearing
Right.
apart families is not an easy thing. They keep saying very clearly, please don't do this, please don't do this. It's not this. Well, we'll let you know closer to the date. They're making a lot of noise about the subject because this is where the groups that are in danger, the older ones, can be really, really exposed fast, and that's a big concern. So I've been hearing a lot of people talking about having a screen at the table,
Sure.
and having kind of Zoom or video conferencing, Skyping in with the rest of the
Right.
family.
Right.
We've seen great stuff over the weekends. Shabbat dinner every week. People are used to doing that as families. Israel's a very small country, so we're really close together.
Sure.
So we see family together. We host each other all the time, and not being together is a tough one.
Yeah.
And we've been on Shabbat that families are having Zoom meetings with everyone together just to be together. So
Right.
Passover is going to be really tough. The word in Hebrew for seder,
Yeah.
which means the dinner, the Passover dinner. There's another
Sure.
word in Hebrew that's called segel, which
Hmm.
means closure. And people are saying, instead of saying Leil HaSeder, they're saying Leil HaSeger, instead of saying the night of the Passover Seder, they're saying the night of the Passover closure.
The restriction.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah. The restriction, the Passover restrictions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's tough. It's going to be tough on families.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. That's rough. Now, what's the sense? Passover is a time like Rosh Hashanah, like Yom Kippur, when maybe Israelis are thinking a little bit more about this idea that God may actually exist. I'm talking about the secular, not the religious community, but kind of more in touch with taking stock of your life. Do I have anybody to make amends with? That's kind of an annual or semi-annual thing. What's the sentiment these days, Yoel, in Israel about the idea that God may exist and actually has something to do with coronavirus? Is that topic outside the religious community coming up at all? Are people saying, is this God's judgment, or is God trying to show us something, or is that kind of not yet on the table?
Look, it's very hard to tell because I don't represent the whole people of Israel. I don't, have a
Right.
direct line with 9 million people.
Sure.
I'm sure that people have time now to think, and
Uh-huh.
they're stuck at home. Your brain's working. You can only take in so much Netflix and so many, social media outlets. And at some point, you
Right.
start thinking. I will say, amongst the community of believers, that I am hearing people taking this as a joyful time, a break, a time to think through things. Um, we're still on the road, both my wife and I, because of the business that we do. We have
Sure.
different opportunities to travel, still need to travel,
Uh-huh.
and meet different people. And we're hearing people saying, we're excited about